first assigned to our groups, I felt really lucky because I knew I had a great group to work with. We started our rehearsal process and we just all were able to work together really well. We did a good job of giving everybody the opportunity to speak and give their ideas, and we tested out everybody's ideas so that everybody had a chance to do that. So that was really great.
Working together. Well, luckily, when we first got assigned to our group, it just happened to be where we were sitting, and luckily one of our groups happened to be one of the best ones, I personally think. And we just worked really well together. We were one cohesive unit, and our thoughts, although some of them clashed, we always found a happy medium and a way to accurately incorporate all the ideas that we had and basically make one really good performance. And I think that despite the fact that we all had different personalities, they just matched up really well, and I think we were really lucky, and I really think our group worked really well together, and our group is amazing.
Well, it was hard for us to get together all the time because it was 7 different people with 7 different schedules, but we really worked well when we got together and did our work so that we could analyze the text and get everything together and cohesive, and all brought our own ideas to share, and I think that it really worked well.
Our group all worked together to bring the most effective ideas to the table, so each person would work at home on their own and come up with what they thought was best for their particular section, and then when we came back to the group, we would discuss our ideas that we worked on and figure out which ones would work the best in the actual final performance. So this group work and talk, brainstorming about different ideas really helped get our thoughts percolating and determine what was best for the final presentation.
So in the context of our group work, we got together, we did some brainstorming about what the ideas for our script would be, and Dani had this great idea. We'd go into the last chapter during that long speech, and we'd flash back to the rest of the book at different moments that kind of symbolized what he was talking about, happiness, we'd go back to a moment where he was happy, etc. I was able to actually buy a digital copy of the book, which I had on my computer, which made it a lot easier to then input the script. And from then on, we had so much flexibility just being able to move the script around so easily and be able to choose different parts of the book. It just made it, a lot easier to work with, and it was a really good idea by Dani. Can't hide that.
So in terms of performing the book, and specifically performing as Fela, it was really difficult in the beginning to try and understand who he was and how he was actually a person in this culture, just because of the time difference, the actual cultural and geographical difference just from where we are today. So it's really hard to get into, but once we finally started, went through the whole book, actually read it through, what helped identifying were a lot of his political views, first of all, and understanding his background, of all the attacks that happened to him, and then understanding his anti-government, primarily military, dictatorship regimes. That was really easy to understand, and it made him it was easier to empathize with him. And then also, once we listened to his music brought a lot of those same themes into his music. So once we understood that, and we're listening to his music, because his music is it's very, to me it sounds a lot like jazz, and I like that music. So for me it was a lot easier to associate with, and it's something that I've enjoyed. So his music was really cool. And so just understanding all those elements together really made it easier to perform as Fela Kuti throughout our whole performance.
Part of the challenge of translating the script from script to stage was trying to interpret how Fela would speak and express his emotions, because in a lot of the videos we saw of him, he was really kind of monotone and chill, and we didn't really know how to accurately express that without seeming like we were just monotone. So one of the problems with the second performance, or the first one of Fela, was that we overdid it and we only focused on a lot of his passion and anger towards the government and establishment. And so for the third performance on the second try for Fela, we really wanted to focus more on just subtle, under the surface anger and different ways to express that through pauses and lowered voice that could also be intense.
In our Fela performance, we really had to work with the fact that one person was the main speaker most of the time, and so we were trying to figure out how exactly to space everyone so that there was movement and tableau, but as well as that the person in front was featured. And so we came up through our process with the parentheses feature, where we felt like everyone was out of the way, but it was also very easy for them to be able to get into tableaus or move through the audience. And in the third performance, we really worked with trying to incorporate the audience themselves and work with breaking down that fourth wall.
Our group decided to use Brechtian techniques in our third performance. We did this in the scene at Doda and Barracks, where Rachael played the mother in the coffin, and we had to actually separate the audience members. So we broke down the fourth wall by trying to tell them to move out of the way with me and Jenny as the characters. So we had to actually communicate with them. And at first they actually didn't even get it, so they just stayed there, but we told them, move, get out of the way, and eventually they did catch on and played along with the performance, and it went really well. They made an aisleway, and the actors were able to bring Rachael as the coffin into the aisle and really encompass a more involved performance.
One of the most difficult parts about working with this text was really relating to Fela, truly trying to empathize with him and then actually becoming him through performance. I thought this was so difficult, well, we as a group thought this was so difficult because his life was just so different from ours, not only growing up in Nigeria, but his parents' abuse and the abuse of just that he received from people throughout his life is just sort of unrelatable in our lives. But I think actually reading through the text and then trying him on almost, I know that sounds weird, but we almost tried him on like a pair of shoes and we became him, and we tried to realize exactly how he was feeling in certain parts. Another thing that we found difficult was he was in polygamous relationships. He had multiple wives. He would beat his wives at times. That was difficult for us to relate to. We live in a society these days that men and women are on an equal playing field, and that's not what he lived in. But I think, so it was difficult not to put our bias into his words. But I think we did a good job just of sort of like self-audiencing and like stepping out and looking at how we were portraying him, because he really was an amazing man, and he did a lot of great things for his country.
One of the difficulties we had reworking the script from our second performance to our third performance was the inclusion of media. We decided that we wanted to include a little bit more Malcolm X than what we originally had. I mean, original script, just a small segment about Malcolm X, and here we had this other civil rights leader, you know, a perfect person to base off of Fela Kuti, and that we could really work into our script. So we were able to go on YouTube and other media outlets and kind of search through the videos, which was real nice and interesting. It allowed us to, you know, see another side of Fela. I mean, this is a guy that he wanted to model his life after. So being able to see another civil rights leader, you know, was kind of like empowering, kind of put ourselves in Fela's shoes just a little bit more. So adding that into the script in certain parts, we felt, you know, it enabled us to have our parts stand out a little bit more, and you could kind of feel the emotion a little bit better. In the end, you know, we wish we could have put in a little bit more of his music, but, you know, there's only a finite amount of time that we had to do this, and, you know, we're all busy. We talked earlier about how there's 7 of us and it's tough to meet. So with all the media inclusion that we had, I was completely surprised and shocked that we were able to get so much in, and it was all so relevant.
One of the benefits of working in a group was seeing how everybody individually interpreted Fela. When we divided up the script, we just kind of told people kind of volunteered for different parts that they wanted, and then we went over it and read through it, and it was interesting seeing how one person might read parts of it with just a different attitude towards his words than another person with maybe more passion and more emotion. Another person might be more calm. And so it was interesting seeing that, and through that we were able to see, I at least was able to, it opened up my mind to see Fela from different perspectives and maybe see his personality from different perspectives that I might have if I was just performing the script on my own. And so that really opened our eyes to different ways that we could personally interpret him too in our own individual parts of the script.
So while we were preparing for our third performance, we started to think of what we could do for our movement, and from a choreographical standpoint or perspective, I guess we wanted to start to incorporate different things that we learned in class, and as Taylor said earlier, we really wanted to ensure that we broke down the fourth wall. So in addition to the new things we learned, we wanted to stay true to our second performance as well. So finding a good median between the two was probably one of our more difficult jobs and tasks, because we didn't know if certain movements would work out as well if from like around the audience perspective versus the parenthesis perspective. So playing with that was really fun, but at the same time it was kind of frustrating because we didn't really have an audience to work with, and we relied more on a whiteboard and more of like a visual image in our own head and just hoped that it would work. But in the end it actually ended up working really well, and our movement within the audience and amongst around the audience and around the room, it just actually flowed really well. And also we found that our tableaus were really effective, so we kept a lot of them and we made sure to make them more precise, and we were all on the same page, and it was more of a cohesive movement. So I think that everything worked out really well during the third performance, movement-wise.
So in terms of analyzing the text, we pretty much stuck close to the class methods we had used, primarily the pentad, in which we focused a lot on the purpose, which is like why the speaker was speaking, you know, why the text was being, you know, said. And so we focused a lot on that and tried to capture tone from that, but of course more importantly from the agency, like how these lines were being said. And it was really difficult for us because whenever we're reading the book as a whole, we just saw everything as being so intense. And that primarily was because we thought that's what the text mirrored. But when we really analyzed it, in going from our second performance to the third performance, we realized it was just the ideas themselves that were tense, not necessarily Fela himself. So in analyzing that, we really focused that Fela not all the time was so intense, and that was really important for us because we had to tone it down in the next performance. And then with all these changes, it was kind of like normally what would be really difficult, especially since we couldn't meet up, all 7 of us at one time. We ended up using Google Docs quite a bit. We relied on that heavily to really edit the script, edit ideas, and, you know, just have a general form for what we were discussing and how were we going to play with, you know, different movements, you know, different speaking lines, tones, everything. A lot of that was discussed over the Google Docs since we couldn't actually meet in person all the time. So that combination kind of saved everything from our performance from number 2 to number 3. Alright, Rudy, so in analyzing the text from between performance 2 and performance 3, how did you use the pentad to really decipher what Fela was trying to get across in chapter 23, specifically the themes of happiness, hatred, creativity, or music, or discovering who he was? Stupendous, thank you.
We wanted to be like Fela.
Fuck it. Shit. We were Fela.
Boom.
Yeah!